Okay. Good morning, colleagues. Hope you can hear me and colleagues online. Very brief. Somewhere there will be my bio, but I won't go there. Bonani Matingzala from Water Research Commission, based in Pretoria. As you know, there's only one office for that organization, but we operate across the country. I'm a research manager responsible for aquatic ecosystem health. Today we have a biodiversity workshop to look at the interests of our biodiversity. We're going to talk on this behalf. And really, if you don't say it now, for the next 15 years, you'll be outside of the bracket. So today we want to make sure that we cover and protect our biodiversity as much as we can with the research that we'll be selecting from your list to fund in the next 5 years to 10 years. But as you know, there's no guarantee for any proposal that is submitted. It goes through stringent processes, which I'll talk about later. For now, I want to introduce the welcoming by Dr. Angus Peterson. I'm sure you're very familiar with him as a Deputy CEO, NRF, and will tell us very briefly his interest as a CEO and what perhaps we should be deliberating on. But very brief on Dr. Angus is a Deputy CEO of the NRF platforms at the NRF. He previously served as a Managing Director of NRF-SAIAB and played a key role in establishing the coastal node of SAIAB. With a PhD in estuarine ecology from Rhodes University, his career spans leadership in research, infrastructure development, and advisory roles across national science initiatives. Dr. Peterson has also held senior positions in the private sector and served on several academic and scientific boards, contributing to biodiversity, marine science, and research transformation in South Africa. This is just a paragraph. It's not a CV. Angus has done so much for this country that is not in this one paragraph. So please, let's welcome Angus to tell us, or to welcome us to SAIAB, NRF. Over to you, Doc. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Am I audible?
Yes.
As you can see, it's quite cold up here in Pretoria. Firstly, to the Water Research Commission, thank you so much for co-hosting this event. The NRF as a whole, but in particular SAIAB, has had a very long-standing relationship with the Water Research Commission, and together we do a lot of good work in the country in terms of supporting research across the sector, not only within biodiversity. Of course, a big welcome to all of our other partners, such as, and I don't want to mention too many of them, but obviously all the universities, SANBI, I see members of SANBI here as well who play a key role. So to all the dignitaries that are attending, and as well as all the staff and students and professoriate, a big welcome. Many of you know me. I was the previous MD of SAIAB, so I find it quite unusual to be opening an event at SAIAB, but it's certainly a lot easier than talking about subatomic physics or astronomy. So I am feeling a little bit more relaxed, mainly because I'm amongst friends. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the key thing here is really you're here to talk about the research direction that aquatic biodiversity should be taking and the challenges there. And looking at the list, you've got preeminent people here who would be able to answer those questions a lot better than I can. And therefore, I think, and also I feel that I am preaching to the converted here in terms of the value of biodiversity and the need for research in aquatic biodiversity. So I'm not really going to speak too much about the standard threats and things like that. SANBI's very comprehensive reports, the IUCN red listing, the green drop and blue drop reports. I think we report very clearly on the importance of aquatic biodiversity in the country, and I think we report very clearly on the importance of aquatic biodiversity in the country. And that's not to say that we shouldn't continue doing that. And it's certainly something that I think there are many areas which you will debate today around where we should be placing our emphasis. In other words, where we've made really good progress, such as taxonomy in certain taxa, to things like the reserve process or flows management. What I really want to talk about today, sorry, just to roll back there, I'm sure you'll be able to answer that a lot more, whether it be fisheries, aquaculture, applied research, basic research into aquatic biodiversity. It is all important. What I really want to talk to you about is how we make a difference. We know that the country at the moment is in a relatively challenging space financially. I can tell you that the NRF is certainly not funded to the level that it should be, and neither, I would imagine, is the Water Research Commission funded to the level it could be, or SANBI, or any of the other agencies such as DFFE. So we've got to work within a broader environment, and I think one of the key messages here is, I think if I look back at my career and the careers in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, we did particularly well in terms of providing and doing some really good basic research. We've moved into areas of applied research, which is really important. But we know that there's a big disjunct between what we do and then what actually happens on the ground, whether we implement the type of stuff we do, whether it gets translated into policy. And I think that I'd like you all to go have a look at the NRF impact framework, because that's certainly where the NRF will be moving, which is to really look at the whole value chain and look at research in terms of how we translate research into impact. And that really starts with co-creation. And I think we are moving into those areas of co-creation. There's no use, and I think in the past we didn't spend enough time on co-creation of our research. There's no use discussing aquatic biodiversity research unless we co-created with the end users, be that society, be that municipalities, be that the management and conservation agencies. So that's a key component, is co-creation, and it's certainly something that is not easy to crack. The whole impact framework globally is something that everyone is moving towards, but no one really has the magic formula as to how to do it, mainly because it's not easy. We've worked in silos in the past where we've had research doing research things, policy doing policy things, and implementation doing implementation things, but we've never really created a mechanism by which we really see a translation to impact on the ground. And why do we know that? Because we know that our biodiversity is getting into even more trouble. Just the other day, I drove through Makanda, open sewers pouring into the river. We know the status of our sewage works in the country. And I could go on a long list in terms of the global and climate change impacts that we know are happening on our aquatic biodiversity, both locally, regionally, and globally. So the question is, we need to really work on co-creation, because unless we work on co-creation, our research is going to end up stagnating within research papers or policies or reports. The other aspect, which I think we really need to start talking about, is, in the last few years, we've really talked about research to policy. And I think that we've done tremendously well. In many respects, we've got progressive water acts, certainly the NBA and the associated recommendations coming out of that speak quite clearly as to what needs to be done. I think the big question we have now is really also policy to action. And that's even a harder nut to crack, because we're talking about how do we actually ensure that municipalities are able to do what they can do, so we don't have open sewerage aspects pouring into our rivers. How do we manage riparian vegetation in terms of clearances and the impact that has on aquatic environments? How do we manage our aquatic extractive activities? And the list can go on and on, as you know. So really, It's the co-creation. We're really good at the research. I think South Africa's got a good background in good basic and applied research. There are lots of opportunities, but it's really the communication we need to work on. We need to really play a far stronger role in communicating our science to the policymakers, because in the end, the policies, while they may get the policies, we need to get budgets attached to them. And we know that those budgets are becoming scant. The one thing I can tell you is selling a sob story in South Africa is not going to work. We have many sob stories, and it's very difficult to argue aquatic biodiversity when we have hospitals collapsing, when we have all the other key aspects within our country, which people can easily relate to. I'm not saying I have the answers, but what I am saying is that we've got a dire need to ensure that we translate aquatic biodiversity research into an understandable format that policymakers can then attach budgets to. And that's a really difficult task. I do have a fundamental belief, looking at many of the names on screen and also knowing many of the names that are actually attending in person at SAIAB, with partners like the Water Research Commission and partners like SANBI and many of the government institutions like DFFE, that there's certainly a will. And I certainly think that we have to make a greater effort. So while today you need to really think about where the key research is, because we also don't want to forget fundamental research. If we forget fundamental and applied research, then we're only mining what we have, and we'll come short within 10 years in terms of current knowledge. So I'm not downplaying human capital development. I'm not downplaying fundamental research. But what I am emphasizing is the translation of the type of work that we do across the board to a format that policymakers can really be pushed into a corner to not only talk about it and say the importance of it, but actually put budgets to it and put projects to it. And we need to really make sure that we achieve that. So I didn't want to preach to the converted about the specifics of whether we want to get into more work into how we manage extractive resources like inland fisheries, or how we talk about eutrophication or heavy metal issues. Those are all issues that I think you guys have all got in hand. There's some excellent experts I see in the team here. But I want you to, in the back of your mind, really think about how we're going to translate this. So that we can ensure that we get the requisite budgets and we get the requisite buy-in. We have the NRF, we have institutes such as national facilities such as SAIAB and SION. We've got really good universities. We've got agencies such as SANBI, DFFE, and of course we've got the Water Research Commission, who we've all worked with for decades. And it's really up to us to work as a team to make sure that we translate this to pressure points within the policy and decision makers to really drive the final bit, which is translating policy to impact. And I'll leave it there. I really wish I was down there, obviously, visiting with my colleagues. Don't tell the physicists, but I do appreciate my aquatic ecologists more than the subatomic and astronomers, just because you are my community. And I do think of you lots, and trust me, at my level, we at the NRF, aquatic biodiversity and aquatic sciences as a broad discipline is certainly front and foremost in terms of thought processes and where the country should be going. And you'll see that also in the launch of the recent presidential PhD program. There's a call for a hub on the water, food, and energy nexus. So certainly there's investment there as well. So I wish you well. I hope you have robust and collegial and interesting discussions. And I would have loved to have been there all day. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anas. Indeed, you touched on interesting points. You also raised questions in your discussion, which I think, I don't know how many people are online and how many are we here, but there is attendance register in circulation, like he's doing that. Anas raised very important aspects such as partnership in the whole business, and also making sure that the stakeholders who actually want to implement are with us. Now, the question is that I have, but I think we will answer along the way, especially with the attendance register from Lucky can tell us even now, who is missing in the house. If we were to convert the research theory that we are doing all those beautiful reports that we produce every now and again, for this to change, that Angus talk about here, who is missing in the house? Talking to the converted Angus is like preaching, not so. The culprits are outside of the church. You should actually be facing them there and tell them to stop doing the criminal stuff they are doing, like releasing wastewater treatment plants, sewage from those plants into the system, not so. And. Okay. So indeed, we need partnership. Unless I fully agree with you, we need money. I'm happy you once served in the private sector as a senior, having a senior position there, which means you know how to channel money and when to channel money to us. So we will hang on you as much as I'm still here. I'm very happy to have you on board. Thank you very much. I know you have a pressure on time, but colleagues, I don't know, like if you allow a question, if there's one to Angus before he leaves. 1, 2, 3, gone. Angus,
Am I getting,
yes.
Chair, am I getting off lightly?
Yeah, but you have to sit on the partnership as well. We need to go and fix at least one catchment and demonstrate that partnership can achieve this. So I don't want to put you on the spot here. You, me, and others have to make sure that we take this research to action. Fully agree. I have no question to you from my side. Thank you very much, Angus, and have a nice day.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just one last point. I think it is incumbent on everyone to hold other people accountable. So, the only way we're going to drive this is to make sure that we hold the higher levels accountable. And I think certainly from the NRF's perspective, these are the type of engagements we want. I couldn't agree more. Who's not in the house, and that's super important. We need to sit down as a senior agencies, such as SANBI, SAIAB, DFFE, Water Research Commission, and really go and speak to the senior stakeholders. And maybe this is the impetus of this meeting, and the outcome of this meeting is for a call for the senior CEOs and deputy CEOs and senior research leaders, such as yourself, within the Water Research Commission, to actually have a call for action to actually meet and have a group discussion.
And of course, we need the municipalities. The actions are at municipal level. We can do whatever. If those guys are not with us on board, those treatment plants are not going to change. And of course, the communities. But let me not get to my presentation, because I'm going to add definitely on Angus' points. Okay. Lucky, do you know if there's anyone from municipality in our midst, online or here? No. That's a very big omission. Perhaps because Angus talk about the bridge between science and policy. How do you close that if you keep talking to yourselves and not talking to actors on the ground? That's a workshop for another day, but we need it. Okay. I will now move on to a presentation on behalf of Water Research Commission CEO. Okay, I will just use the up and down arrow. Sorry. Thank you very much, colleagues. Let me quickly do my CEO's talk. She's with a team in a place called Nkanda in KZN, trying to fix siltation in dams and rivers. There's a tool that we produce through your research that is promising to help us take up sediment and help that water security. So all the seniors and deputy minister are there now preparing for that. So I'm talking on behalf of it. I don't know, Lucky, this is sitting on, there's something here. Okay. Okay. Some of you may not know that Jennifer, our CEO, was a student here. I think from master's or no, junior degree, all the way. So he's a product of this institution, Rhodes and SAIAB. So this is what I had a discussion with her, and I'm going to talk on behalf of her now. Next. Is my next on the arrow or this thing? Oh, can I use this? Okay. What do I press? Okay. I just wanted to challenge my colleagues online and my colleagues in-house. Can anyone tell me what is this we see in front of us? Could be a common name, could be a species name. I'll prefer that. A species name. That you can go common name is okay. By lift of hand and just tell me what is this question and answer. Remember, I'm a lecturer, so I don't want people to sleep in my class. Don't tell me that. Don't tell me that. Anyone online, Lucky?
No.
No, guys, you can't do that. This is SAIAB.
Someone saying it's a daily consensus.
Someone online is saying that. Who is that?
Hey.
Hey, thank you very much. That's what it is. Now, for those who are still battling what is happening, indeed, this is Sandalia Pansy, Rocky Kappa. It's from here. I think Kaiskama and such other rivers of the Eastern Cape. I think it because it has got something to do with Chief Sandile, and it has got something therefore to do with citizens. There was a good reason why it was named like that, and you can see Paul Skelton, one of our veterans in this science. So we are very proud to have people like Paul helping us get the information on these chaps. And of course, there are other projects that we are working on with SAIAB to try and say what other fish are actually in the systems. So we'll be doing a DNA because we are moving online now. As Angus said, we have been preaching this in one way, maybe we need to preach it differently. So before they get into extinction, let's find all of them. So there's a role of our indigenous people to make these things change. Now, I put this, say, is this real? Where to from here? These lines are cutting like where to from here? You can see this is 1970 reflection collected by one of our friends here at WWF. If this is where we are, and we are still getting worse, unfortunately. Now, what does this mean in terms of biodiversity we are trying to protect? I think Anna's put it very clear. We do have a challenge, okay, with freshwater being worse off. And then if you go to our own reports produced by Sanbi and others, guys, we are in trouble indeed. That confirms now the local situation, particularly estuaries and any other inland freshwater systems where there's fish. Highly threatening. you can see yourself, estuaries, wetlands, coastal. I can tell you even groundwater is not safe. And groundwater is our 32-day notice if you want. If you really will run out of this surface story, what's going to happen? Now we don't care about the surface water, and the groundwater is not safe at all. There's a lot to be done, colleagues. I can see something, but you can't see anything. Oh, it's sharing for the benefit of online colleagues. Sorry for that, online colleagues. Okay, sorry colleagues for that little bit of interruption, and I'm sure now everybody's happy. You can see what you are talking about. There was no agenda to hide anything. You did not see. You will get these slides, everything from a report. Okay, basically that's where we were. That all water resource types are in trouble, and you know we've got every piece of tool to make this change, but it's just not happening. So that has to be a bridge between this policy and science and society. Right. So what is WRC doing? We have, of course, like you do, an implementation strategy for the next 5 years. And this is where we are putting everything that we want to do. And indeed, let's see how we want to change the world now from our side.
There we go.
Okay, right. You're probably familiar with this. You may have seen this somewhere. This stuff has to sit into your mind every time you think about submitting a proposal. With what Angus has said now, we are not getting to that impact level, not at the rate we want to. Hence, we have got about 82% of dysfunctional wastewater treatment plants. And now the question is, if the whole country is releasing sewage into the rivers, dams, and wetlands and estuaries, really, what are we doing in the activities here that is not helping us change that? So there's something wrong in the chain. So every time you start a project, you think about the results. Why are you doing this? It is no longer a purely academic exercise. We need those research aspects, of course.
Next. There we go.
It's taking long.
It's on my side.
Okay. We are results driven, stakeholder driven, research and development. So every proposal that you put, as I said, make sure that you think about the outcomes. The best way to reflect on this is to start from outcome. If I'm counting the bit of beat it, Okay. Why am I doing that? How is that going to make impact to the people in this country, the society in this country? See if you can link it, because really research is for societies, for changing things on the ground. Yes, we want to graduate and do everything, but we are not going to count it of a mayfly and stop there. You have to find a way of enriching that. So we focus too much on the inputs, which is money. We talk about money now, not so. Activities, we are very sharp in that. We do a lot of research, and then we stop there. Most of the WRC reports for the last 53 years or so, not all of them, the tendency is to say the output is someone else's business. Now make it your business. Even attend the local municipality meetings and contribute there, because outside of this complex you are sitting in there, you are a citizen of this country, and you don't want to run away from your rivers because they are stinking. You become part of that. So the best thing is to be able to attend even the meetings and change the decisions that are made on the basis of your science. So we adopted this policy from DPME, which is the presidential office, really. And I'm asking myself, if they have such a nice outcomes-based tool to monitor whatever we are doing, and they are doing as departments, even the municipalities, then why are we in the situation we are in now? Don't they see that we are not getting it right? When that happens, what do they do? So there's something missing in the life. I don't want to say it, but perhaps someone will say it. So the outputs should always be around, okay, at least if I cannot go and make someone happy at the outcomes level now, because my mandate stops here and impact even much later, but at least I must have trained, empowered, whether it's a manager, engineer, technician, or whoever must make a change, must be trained, and that is your, the furthest you can go in the research space, have them trained. They must be knowledgeable. Okay, as I said, the WRC is outcome-based. We start from outcome now. Next 5 years, we are not talking anything less than that. Say, where do you want to make a change? Make it very clear. And you must have consulted with people who need that information. There's a tendency of saying this product will assist the municipality, will assist, but in the proposal itself, there's no way where you have interacted with that person who needs this tool. So this tool will not be taken up, and you will not be there. There was money, boom. And then we ask, what is the return on investment? So outcome-based research is for society. So less of the perception, but engage. Let's fix attachment with people. So the issue here is that you must have a problem clearly identified. What is the problem? Our template for research says rationale or problem statement upfront, but people just, not give any detail. It's very important that we have that problem statement now. And then you can look at the effects of that. And then what next is, what are the root causes of this problem? Together with the society, can't be yourself business. And then we work in this so-called results chain, from conceptualization to at least handing over an output. Why do we want to deliver this? Who will benefit? Impact, outcome. So you can see that there's planning, there's monitoring and evaluation from the word go all the way. There will be indicators. Are you getting there or not? So it's a different call, but I think we can handle it. We have talked about this story called nature-based solution. Is one of the concepts that we believe they work towards inclusivity. You will see the society here, you will see ecosystem, you will see nature, ecosystem-based ideas, biodiversity, everything is in here. Now, can we adopt perhaps this kind of a tool and say, what is happening in the river nearby Gqeberha or Makanda? Can we work together with the community and change what is happening there? Of course, central in all of this is really restoration, because we have killed these resources now. Now, before I close, on behalf of our CE, that picture comes from SAIAB team in honor of my colleague on fish, who had a voice he didn't need a microphone, and that was Olaf. We did this work with Olaf here, and I'm told now there's a consultant who's working on the stuff of the cameras underwater. Excellent. Let's improve on that. But now the question is problems and more problems and more problems. Eh? On these ones, we are actually adding now something we call emerging contaminants, chemicals of emerging concern. Now, this is making the story worse, if you know where we are coming from in terms of other stuff that we thought we know. There are new things now, particularly post-COVID. Toxic stuff that is attached to microplastics. Do we know what is happening to our fish there? I'm told that by 2050, there will be more tons of plastics in the ocean than the fish we need. That can't be correct, guys. What's happening? It's not local, it's also international issue. The role of the citizen scientists, the communities. I mean, if government has been trying with all this beautiful legislation that we have in this country, but this is where we are now. Surely we need to look at different ways of doing things. Perhaps the bottom up helped by the top down will help us here. So we need citizens too, but we need citizens empowered. Citizens must have tools credible so that they can even take you and me to court if you are not doing the right thing. We have to stand together. The role of business, Angus, there was once a senior manager in money. We need that money. I guess like we missed biodiversity targets. I think that was 2020, 2020. I think we missed those, I can guess. I know we missed most of the Millennium Development Goals. I'm a culprit. I was there to water affairs. I'm sure we are going to miss most of the SDG. 2030 is tomorrow now. You see? Now, there's going to be another 15 years. And we'll be preaching the same thing. It can't be right. Do we have time? I don't think so. Perhaps you will not miss Africa agenda because it's quite long. But it doesn't say do things in 2063. It says do them now, you've got time, budget. Okay, thank you very much. I don't think we have time on our side to fix things, but we have to work toward that. I welcome any engagement question, if there's any. I think we have 2 minutes or so, Lucky.
Yes.
So doing well on time.
Just one question.
There is a question. Okay.
No, just.
But normally you don't question openings. Let's see what the question.
No, it's not yet. Just 1 minute.
Okay.
One question.
Okay. You can ask from here if there's anything. Well, we are hoping that there may be someone online. Okay. In the absence of that, like I think we can move, my friend. The panel is going to give us a lot of answers. We have thrown a lot of questions. So let's get there quicker. Right.
Do you want to address something here?
What about the role of, what is LG-CETA?
Local government system.
Oh, okay. Yes, CETA is funded at your and my tax money. I always ask, when we say there's no capacity to do what? I mean, we have got full house at the local municipality, employees, regional offices, national office. What is happening there? Is it a political will? Is it a threat from outside to do things wrongly, not the right way? What is it? I don't believe that we really have such a big capacity problem. Yes, CETA we have a water CETA, we have CETA for other businesses as well. What are they doing? What is their role? You remember we asked here, who is missing in the house? So we need to engage these guys and find out, perhaps can you help us take the information we have into the school curricula so that this message gets to the young ones as early as grade 2R or 0 or whatever, so that they can stop us as parents. They become the ambassadors and chase their parents when they are doing wrong things at home. So I think we need to bring them on board. They are very rare. I don't see them in the space. So this is why I was saying we need to know who is here and the role that they can play. So yes, they do have a role to play, but we need to engage them. Okay, I think let's move to the next presenter then. Who's going to give us a keynote address on the global status of biodiversity and its impacts on the economy. Yeah, this is Sanbi. Is it Professor, Dr. Ms.?
Just got me to that.
I'll call Ms. because you are not putting title there, or say doctor, then you can scratch it out if you want. It's Dr. Tomila Raymond from Sanbi. Let me just quickly go through the bio because Lucky is very, very organized. Thank you, Lucky. You correct me if the naming is not so good. I'm trying my best. Domitila Raimondo is the Threatened Species Program Manager at Sanbi. She is responsible for the species assessment for South Africa's National Biodiversity Assessment. Domitila has extensive experience assessing the threat status for South Africa's animal and plant species. Is the lead author of the Red List of South African Plants in 2009 and has coordinated the Red List assessment for many animal groups. She is dedicated to ensuring that species information fits into the land use decision-making. Domitila is also involved in species conservation work internationally, right, and chairs the IUCN Species Survival Commission's Plant Conservation Committee. Excellent. She is passionate about mainstreaming species information into development work and works across Africa to ensure technical transfer and capacity development takes place to mobilize biodiversity information needed for informed decision-making. This is excellent bio. Domitila, we are in your hands. Please tell us how to do it and share with us the international expertise. Thank you very much. Over to you now.
Thank you. Can I just confirm the presentation's clear? And you can all see it? Okay,
Yes.
fantastic. Morning, everyone. I feel very privileged to be giving you this keynote presentation. As I start, though, I want to say that one of my colleagues and the real freshwater expert is in the room with you, Nancy Job, who heads up our freshwater program. So I hope during the course of the day, if you have any specific detailed questions on what I present, she'll certainly be able to answer them probably with far more knowledge than I can. Okay, so I, as you heard in my bio, I head up the Threatened Species Program for SANBI. I'm responsible for all assessment work for species in the country. But today I'm going to give you a presentation that shows what we know about freshwater biodiversity and how it compares to our information about biodiversity generally for the country. And most of it will focus on the results from the National Biodiversity Assessment 2018. But we are busy at the moment, and the reason I'm not with you in person is we're busy working very hard towards the next National Biodiversity Assessment deadline, end of June, for the main analyses. So I will be showing you a few of the things coming out for this one, but yeah, most of it is still very much in the data crunching process. All right, so let's just start off with reminding ourselves about our absolutely magnificent biodiversity in the country. South Africa remains really fortunate that over 70% of our ecosystems are in a natural condition, and I think we need to remind ourselves that. I know it's particularly a little bit harder for freshwater systems because while they will look natural, they have other influences such as pollution that really do compromise them. But I do think, compared to many other countries, we're still in a really good situation and have the ability to maintain and conserve our biodiversity. It's also good just to remind ourselves about how much of the world's biodiversity we're responsible for. This comes from our biodiversity profile, which is in our National Biodiversity Assessment, and it just kind of highlights just how high our diversity is and also what high levels of endemism we have. I probably don't need to say too much about this for those of you here. I think you're all experts, but just really, really high levels of diversity. We've got like a high proportion of the world's species, and then, lots and lots of endemics. So more than half of South Africa's reptiles, amphibians, butterflies, freshwater fish are endemic, and about 2/3 of our plants are. And then in the marine environments, even often higher, but at least 40% of the 10,000 species that we've worked on so far were known to be endemics. So really, really high. Okay, so how we assess the status of our biodiversity in South Africa, we don't make up our own systems. We follow very closely international standards, in particular the IUCN-linked knowledge products. So our species assessments are done using the IUCN Red List categories and criteria. Our ecosystem assessments are done using the IUCN Red List ecosystem criteria. And we also identify key places for biodiversity using the global standard for key biodiversity areas. So our National Biodiversity Assessment, the results that I'll show you now, gets produced every 7 years, but it also includes these wealth of technical reports. So if you're interested in any of the things that I'm talking about, really encourage you to read the freshwater chapter, especially the freshwater technical report, which has so much more detail than what I'll show you now. Okay, so what we do in South Africa is we bring to the attention of the decision makers a few key statistics, and we call them headline indicators. And for each assessment, we look at the status of our ecosystems, our ecosystem types, and we look at those across the realm. So you can see that they're terrestrial, river, wetland, marine, estuarine, coastal, and sub-Antarctic. And then we do that also for species, and you'll see there the species that we do assessments for. We don't only work on how threatened they are. So the top bar is our threat status of which ones are threatened, but we also look at what actually we're doing to protect species and are we doing a good enough job. And that's really, really important because, if we're not protecting enough, then that's a message that as South Africans, we can do something about. We can expand our protected area networks. We can improve the effectiveness of our protection. So I'm going to focus in on both of these headline indicators and the results in today's talk. Okay, so let's start with the assessment of species. These are the taxonomic groups that went into our last National Biodiversity Assessment. The same groups will come into the new one, but we're updating a few, and you'll be happy to know that most of the new groups coming on are freshwater groups. I'll show you that at the end of the talk. And then how you read these, we call them bicycle diagrams, is the bigger circle is all species in South Africa, and then the smaller circle is the endemics. And then the colors show if they're threatened. So if it's green, it's least concern, they're fine. And the darker the red, the more threatened. So critically endangered species are in red, and endangered in orange and yellow is vulnerable. So when you're seeing high proportion of that circle in color, it means that the group is under a lot of pressure. And then the brown means that we don't know enough. It's data deficiency. You can see for marine groups, especially, we have quite high levels of data deficiency. All right, so let's just drill down a little bit closer, look at these headline indicators again and those bicycle diagrams, but let's just look at what's going on in the freshwater environment. And so from that headline indicator, you can see that the ecosystems that are the most threatened are our wetlands. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone in the room, but it's a really important message that we do ensure comes across strongly in the National Biodiversity Assessment. And then similarly, for our species that have been assessed, freshwater fish are our most threatened group. Under protection level, wetlands are also our most poorly protected, and freshwater fish are also our most poorly protected group, and that we have done assessments for. And I'll talk to you a little bit more later why that's the case. All right, we also do something, so we don't only just show the proportion of overall threat, we also do look at trends over time and work out if our species are becoming more threatened over time. And this is, we do through the production of the Red List Index, which is a global indicator. It's actually now been adopted by the Global Biodiversity Framework to determine the status of species. And the steeper the line, the faster the group is heading towards extinction. And the lower it is on the graph, the more species are threatened. So if you look at this, this is the result for South Africa species. You see what really sticks out is that freshwater fish are, first of all, the most threatened. They're the lowest on the graph. And then they're also declining very, very rapidly. So that's a big problem. And another group declining rapidly are the aquatic plants. You can see up. So although they're not as threatened overall, they're also declining really quickly. So that gives you a very clear picture that freshwater species are not doing well. Dragonfly line is not too bad, and that's interesting. But dragonflies can escape their aquatic environment by flying to, if one of their rivers is polluted, they can fly to another one. So it's the species that are really stuck that seem to be having the biggest problem. And yeah, you should have been picking up in all the bicycle diagrams that I've showed so far, but freshwater fish are by far the most threatened group. And just look at the number of endemics. I mean, they're either all threatened or near threatened, or have a few problems with data, but the majority of them are of conservation concern. Okay, so I'm going to spend a bit of time now looking at the pressures, and the main pressure across the country that we see is habitat loss, mainly to agriculture, and that that has a big impact on freshwater ecosystems because of sedimentation, soil erosion, sedimentation flowing into rivers. But the other pressure that we're seeing is overfishing. And then pollution, climate change, and biological invasions are a big problem. So here on this graph, the bigger the bubble, the more species in the taxonomic group are threatened by that pressure. So you see the pressures on the left-hand axis here, and then the group at the top. And if we just focus in on freshwater groups, so amphibians, the ones that were in our last NBA, amphibians, freshwater fish, and dragonflies, you see the biggest issue sitting here in the bigger block is around invasive and other problematic species, mainly. So for freshwater fish, we've got a huge problem with invasives. I think you're all pretty aware of that. And for amphibians, also woody invasives in our Cape Mountains, where we've got high diversity, is a big problem. It's impacting most of the natural wetlands in the mountain systems. And then flow modification, flow regime changes are also a huge problem, as is pollution. And then agriculture and aquaculture remains a challenge. So, so those are the pressures, and then we just want to look at those a little bit more closely. I think it's important to see that sedimentation is a huge challenge and remains a huge challenge. It really alters the way water flows, but it also causes loss of habitat for aquatic biota, and changes food web structures. So that is a real problem. Nutrient pollution. This was picked up in the last NBA. These are the main results are coming out from the 20 NBA. But this new NBA has, the 2025 one has just shown that pollution has ramped up to a serious level now. So we actually we're in big trouble with pollution, and I'm sure that will come up today in multiple areas. Chemical pollution big and as is thermal pollution. Okay, it has long-lasting impacts and consequences for aquatic organisms. In our last NBA, we picked up the problem of river pollution and how that affected just even big animals like the Nile crocodile. It was listed for the first time as vulnerable in the last NBA. It's still struggling with pollution impacts. And then the interesting case of Campus Dam being dried up completely because of drought conditions and then bad contamination following that. That has caused a huge problem. And for the first time, we've uplisted the lesser flamingo in this NBA from near threatened to vulnerable because of that problem. So yeah, we're starting to really see the impacts on the trends in species. All right, I'm going to take a moment to look at what we can do about it and how well we protect our species. So this other headline indicator shows how well we're protecting. So that if it's shown in dark green, it's well protected, and if it goes through to gray, it's not protected. Okay, and if you look at, and we do it for all species in a taxon group, these are the groups that we've done it for so far. So if the majority of that taxon group is dark green, like you see for reptiles at the bottom, they're relatively well protected. And then you can see the poor freshwater fish are, again, our most poorly protected group. So these are the species groups we've done it for. And what we do is we take data on where species occurs, the spatial data, and we intersect it with protected areas. But then we don't just say, okay, well, is it in a protected area, or is there enough of the species in a protected area? Have we done a good enough job at covering enough habitat for that species in a protected area? That's the first part we do, and that's called representation. But then we go through a very rigorous process of saying, is that protected area actually able to mitigate the threats to that species? And if it's not, then it's not being effective in a protected area. And we get experts to score good, fair, or poor, how well we're managing to mitigate those threats. So it's a very intensive process. And the results are very interesting. South Africa is pretty much the only country that does this in the world, but it's really recognized for doing this because it is very important. You can say that, you protect X proportion of the country, but are you protecting the species that you are responsible for properly? And so this indicator really does allow us to do that. And you see like that really, like when we include effectiveness, the number of species that are considered protected really changes. So in our last NBA, we had 27% of freshwater fish as well represented in protected areas. But once we looked at were they able to effectively mitigate threats, only 17% still qualified as well protected. And similarly for plants and amphibians, we saw a lot of species drop a category of protection when we looked at were we able to mitigate threats, especially threats of invasive alien species. So yeah, we did this. I'll show you the two examples on the screen here. The Table Mountain ghost frog, it's restricted to streams on Table Mountain. And while its whole global distribution falls within the Table Mountain National Park, there's extraction of water by the city of Cape Town and embarrassingly by SANBI also, that is causing the species to decline quite badly. And so it's very threatened. And so the park is not able to mitigate the threats, hence it's not properly protected. And the other example is Paul Skelton's redfin here, Pseudobarbus skeltonii. And it is also got most of its range within protected areas, but because of invasive fish and other impacts on the rivers, it's downgraded in its protection level. Okay. So now I'm just going to look forward a little bit. So that was all the last NBA. You could see the picture wasn't good for freshwater species, for freshwater ecosystems. Based on this, SANBI and SAIAB have collaborated to have to apply for an NRF Foundational Biodiversity Information Program to focus on freshwater species. It's called Refresh. I hope many of you know about it. These are all the partners, Albert, Chikona, and Davidine, my colleague and my team, Van der Kolf lead this amazing project. And they're covering, oopsie, sorry, I've lost the slide. where's my slide? Sorry, went to the wrong place. This is supposed to be feedback. They're covering these taxonomic groups, yeah, they're covering these taxonomic groups in these areas. So it's an amazing project. And what we found from this project, what we've been able to do for the first time is assess groups that are from the arid parts of the country. They're still freshwater groups, like these species that live in these pans, the fairy shrimps, and Astraca. We've done a first-time assessment for them, which we're really excited about. And quite a few are threatened, some even possibly, one even possibly extinct. And then the other group, they're the pressures to it, agriculture and development here coming out is the highest pressure, because if these pans are actually destroyed through transformation, that is the biggest problem. And then other group that we've done for the first time are the freshwater crustaceans. And these are not as threatened, interestingly. So most of them are least concerned. It's quite nice to have a group that is not as threatened. And it seems like crabs are able to somehow get around, and very few have very restricted ranges. It's just these new species that were found in the Eastern Cape forests that are the ones that are coming out as threatened, but we also think that they're still undersampled. So it looks like crabs are a bit resilient, which is really great. It's nice to have one group, not too bad. I'm going back to 2 slides that I don't want to miss. So that's the Refresh project, and that's new information coming into the NBA. And then another really interesting new result that is just fresh from BirdLife, very fresh. It hasn't been presented to anyone before. You're the first audience to see this, is the Bird Register Index. And it shows quite clearly that water birds are declining faster than any other group. So the pink line. So remember, it's the angle of the slope that tells you the rate at which a group is declining. So although they weren't originally that threatened, in the last red list in 2015, they were the least threatened of these groups that are shown here, the seabirds, terrestrial birds, raptors, etc. But now they're declining really, really fast. And that's a really worrying trend. And this has come out strongly in the last 10 years that our water birds are a problem, are struggling, and this is directly from pollution impacts. And the data are very reliable because it's coming from SAIAB data. It's very quantifiable and easily comparable between the 2 time periods. It's also coming from the Quack data, and we've had the Birdie project analyze it in a very systematic way. So these are the species that have increased in threat status. I'm not showing you all the seabirds and all the other raptors, etc., that have increased. I'm just showing you a few of the terrestrial, because they, for some reason, have coded lesser flamingos terrestrial. I would have coded it as a water bird. And then all the other water birds. So, common things like yellow-billed duck and other things like that are like showing serious declines. So this is interesting and worrying. And it's a real trend of what's going on to the freshwater ecosystems. Okay, so I just want to say, like, we do try to put the message out there. So we do these analyses, we show the stats, and then we put out key messages in every national biodiversity assessment. And in the last national biodiversity assessment, we really provided decision makers with these key messages. And out of the top 6 on that, how important biodiversity is, 2 of them were linked to freshwater. And I just want to end the talk just reminding you that we really do put that message out. So healthy ecosystems are essential for water security. Rivers, wetlands, and their catchment areas are crucial ecological infrastructure for water security, often complementing built infrastructure by the benefits of some of these ecosystems. But the benefits of these ecosystems are currently compromised by their poor ecological condition. So that was a big message that we put out, and we had a big focus on strategic water source areas and improving the condition of these, and that is going again into the next NBA. We also had a message on small high-value ecosystem types providing disproportionate benefits to people, specifically wetlands being highlighted here as these small ecosystem types, but so important for the ecosystem services. So yeah, we will have that message again very strongly. Nancy is responsible for the freshwater messages. She's with you, so she can tell you a little bit more. We'll continue to push this message, and we are excited that our science gets better and better on freshwater groups, as I showed you the new ones coming in. But now, as many of the other speakers are saying, it's about what we can actually do about it. And so good luck with today and working out, some of the important interventions that can happen. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Now we can really ask hard questions. Nigeria, hang on there. Naki, do you have questions maybe online, or should we proceed?
There's a question from
There's a question. Okay.
Tiki can unmute and ask. Oops.
Okay.
They can just unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, that was bouncing around there. Just a quick question in relation to Canfers Dam. You mentioned that the problem had been that the system had dried up. I was under the impression, correct me if I'm wrong, that the major problem there was actually flooding, that redirection of water from treatment works had actually flooded the place and made it uninhabitable. Was the drying up before that, or was it since happening?
That
Because I
was
was there in November.
It was before. So that was in our last NBA. Now the flooding has happened since recently, right? And it's had caused huge damage. So it's now a combination of both that has really pushed the species down. But the flooding has been, it's destroyed the nesting sites as I understood it. And
no water to us following what generated by an excess. Thank you, Donatella.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other question, colleagues? Yes, please, the mic, start with your name, please.
Thanks for the info. Just wondering, have any species threat status improved since the time because of any interventions or?
Yes. Yes, they have. If I stop sharing, I can answer that. So we've got a few species that have improved, about 4 mammals and 8 birds. So far, only 4 plants out of the 900 that we've worked on. So a handful have. I don't have that offhand. It will certainly be highlighted in the NBA. Try and quickly think of some good improvement stories. It's not coming to me in the moment. I'm sorry, but I can quickly check. But there are a handful, and what we are also going to have quite a nice positive message on is that our protection level indicator is going to improve, because we've expanded a lot of new protected areas, a lot of excellent stewardship work across the provinces. So the results for the birds came out this week, and it's 4.6% increase in protection levels. So we were hoping the other groups that are being crunched at the moment will come through. The results are due early next week. So we should know very soon just how many other ones have improved in protection level, but we're expecting quite a good improvement. So in that green indicator on protection level, we're going to see a nice upward trend. Whereas on threat status, unfortunately, so while we have got improvements, so like I said, 8 birds improved status, but 37 became more threatened. And that's the same trend we've got with mammals. It's like 25 more threatened and a handful, 4 or 5 that are less threatened. So unfortunately, and with plants, it's frightening that the numbers, we're sitting at 20% of species crashing. So what is really worrying is, while we're trying to improve, the background, the pressures are just scaling, and the lack of resources in agencies to do something about it is starting to tell. The big declines actually are coming from climate change. The drought that hit the western part of the country has had a big impact on many of our taxonomic groups. So we're seeing the first kind of climate change results coming through. And all the positive improvements are all because of conservation interventions and interventions to actually protect properly and restore. And and recover species, but they are still at a handful compared to what's going on overall.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Demetria. And indeed, it's encouraging that at least we are saving something is coming back. That's very, very encouraging. It may not be at the scale that we want, but it says we are doing something about it. Hopefully, the 2028 or whatever NBA will be much, much better. Well, it's not the report itself, but it's the actions. We'll be reporting something much, much better. We just cross our fingers. Okay, provided we all act. And there is a question around the method used in how to determine species in decline, as online there by Mazi Matabal. You can unmute, say, or ask your question, or Demetria, do you hear that? Did you get that? Very brief.
Yes, so we use the IUCN Red List criteria that are standardized globally to work out the rate of a population's decline. We look at what we knew about it in the past, what we know about it now, and we use the monitoring data that's available in South Africa to tell us if things have got worse or not. We really depend on these monitoring projects that are done across the country, and especially for freshwater systems. So that is something you can talk about today. It's like we need those systems. We need freshwater scientists to be working in all of our provincial agencies to be gathering the data, because we can't use anything remote sensed for freshwater systems. We actually have to have the monitoring data. But so far we've had that, and it's really made a difference to use it.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I've got 5. So let's start. Let's start with the one that you finished off, that you need data. We all need this data. And here in your talk, you did not mention the role of citizen scientists in data collection and whether you are open to accepting data collected by communities. Train.
Yeah.
Not
We absolutely are, and I'm sorry, I just didn't have enough time to go into all the details. It does get covered in our NBA. We totally depend on citizen science data, and all of our assessments are based on citizen science data. So we have big programs for birds, for plants, for many different groups. Projects mainly run through iNaturalist, and SANBI runs iNaturalist. So we encourage any citizen science projects that you're thinking about to do it via iNaturalist. But amazing information that's coming through, and we continue to require that. So yeah, that's very, very important.
Sure. The other question is on the thermal pollution you mentioned there, and I know there's EBA. It's hard to protect rivers because they are longitudinal, but it sounds like you can do something about degrading riparian and buffer zone. What is your take in funding such research?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely worthwhile. I'm not a technical expert. I think you should probably ask somebody in the room to answer, but it would make sense.
Nancy will answer that. Thank you very much. Without wasting your time, I think I'm covered. I'm just remembering that Environmental Affairs recently launched a climate response, something for coastline. And the minister was there. People from other countries, Germany, UNEP were there, wishing us good luck, and hopefully leveraging some resources. So we really need money, Demetria. Even the citizen scientists who are collecting your data do need some kind of incentive one way or another. Otherwise, they may hang up and say, there's the mandate, people must do their job. But we want them to be on board. Thank you very much for that. And I think the issue of cooperative governance, I think at some stage we need COCTA to lead this kind of discussion, or DPME or whatever. Those people have got power to call, to demand that thou shalt be there. I don't know. But we need that powerful voice. This decline in biodiversity is not acceptable. We may be comfortable saying 70% is not bad, but it's actually getting below that. You showed us where the fish is, for example. The Western Cape that is trying to do its best down there. They seem to be protecting something of a 17%. Again, we are battling. So we do need everybody on board. We do need budgets from different organizations, and we do need to pull at the same time. So it's one of the challenges that we need to address, colleagues. Thank you very much, Demetria. I think we can leave it here if there are no other questions.
Thank you.
Oh, there's a question online. Can we see that? No. Tiki.
Sorry, is it me again? Just a question there. Okay, you've got your assessments and your recognition of areas that are at risk, species at risk, systems that are at risk. Is there any sort of protocol or conduit whereby that information is then translated or goes down the line to decision makers, people who actually act to at least some degree on the recommendations that come out of your assessments? Does that exist at all?
Yeah, so it definitely gets disaggregated down to the provincial level for provinces to act, and there are parliamentary level targets that get set. So after the last one, the target of improving species protection level by 5% was set, and as I mentioned, we're doing the analyses now to see if we achieved that. And we're close. Like we're at 4.6% for the birds. Hopefully, the other groups will come up similarly to show if we achieve that target or not. So it's very much like from these analyses that do get one or two government level targets set. The big thing is, can we get this information down to the provinces? I mean, to the municipalities, and I think that's our hard challenge. So I don't know if I broke up there, or if you could hear me. But
No,
getting
I
it
got you all the way. Just I think if there's going to be research, that particular point that you just made right now is something that should be looked at, which is not something that the average biologist or ecologist actually has much experience in doing. That requires a fairly special skill to get that information across. But thank you again.
Thanks.
Okay, very much, colleagues, and thank you to Demle. Another round of applause. The colleagues online, you know how to clap hands. Do clap hands when we do well here. If we don't, show the thumb down, eh? Thank you very much. If you were here, we'll hand over a present, but unfortunately you are elsewhere. Right, we have eaten our time for stretching the leg. We are already minutes into the next session, but I believe biology must be dealt with, or zoology. So can we have maybe a 5 minutes break? So we meet here at 11:25? Yes. Okay, thank you very much.
Yes, that's me. Yes. Yes. We'll see the questions will come through for guys, so let's go.
Okay, you see here.
Colleagues, hope we are all back from our 5 minutes break. Now we are going into the real interaction. Only time for lunch will stop us because we are hungry. Otherwise, we will now have to tackle this and really get to know where we're going to the next 5 years. So colleagues online will come back. Now I'm going to introduce our next harsh man. It's going to be very harsh on us. While we are not going to have breakaways, but he's going to make us talk. I don't know how many of us, but I'm told it's about 150 to 200. So all of us are going to talk, and we are really going to engage because we need to change this. And I know Tommy can make you talk. Now, Professor Tommy Bowman is the manager of the NRF-SAIAB Elwande Coastal Node and the Shallow Marine and Coastal Research Infrastructure based out in Gqeberha. Their main mandate is to establish long-term observatories to detect change, including how coastal biodiversity is responding to the drivers of change. Tommy's research interest includes phytoplankton, microphytobenthic, diatom, ecology, and biogeography. Welcome, Tommy, and please help us get the answers. This candidate to you. Thank you. Over to you, Tommy.
Thank you very much, Bunani, for the introduction. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So the second half of this workshop is, we'll take the format of a panel discussion. And I think we are really honored to have 5 panelists with us sitting on the stage here today. They are experts within their fields of biodiversity research or biodiversity management. So how the panel discussion will work is I will introduce each of the panelists briefly and then ask them a broad question on their work within biodiversity before I go on to the next panelist. And the reason for that is basically just to start the discussions so that you know the expertise of our panelists. And hopefully that will stimulate some questions and discussion points for our in-house delegates as well as our online attendees. And then once we've completed those introductions, we'll open the floor for questions. And for the online people, please put your comment or question in the chat and indicate, if you do that, to whom you would like to address that question, or indicate to all. And then we'll see who will take that question. You can also raise your hand if you online, if you would like to ask a question in person to any of the panelists. All right, thank you. So without further ado, my first panelist that I'm going to introduce is Ms. Nancy Job from the South African National Biodiversity Program. So Nancy is the lead of the Freshwater Biodiversity Program at the South African National Biodiversity Institute. She manages the National Wetland Map Project, leads the freshwater component of the National Biodiversity Assessment, is the South African Ramsar Science and Technical Review Panel focal point in support of DFFE, amongst many other duties. So warm welcome, Nancy. And to kick off, my question to you would be, what do you see the main threats to aquatic biodiversity and to the goods and services that biodiversity provides to us? Over to you. Thanks.
It'll be difficult to manage my notes, but I'll do my best. So I was really fortunate to have Domitilla go ahead of me. I think she laid out the threats quite comprehensively. And I'm hoping people from the audience will also highlight some threads from their knowledge. And so I'd like to very much pick up on Angus's really relevant points. And there was no conferring ahead of time. But for me, I think a very key threat undermining our ability to act is the modality in which we work, the way we work in very separate ways. We're competing for very scarce funds. A lot of funding comes into the country that we don't know about, and with the best will, people are picking up on that funding, but not looping in the people that are ready to implement and our structures. So we at the moment in some ways working against each other, and I think that's for me it really is the biggest threat at the moment. The way we're structured, the way we're not quite collaborating well enough. I think it's a really serious and urgent issue, and I'd like to take up Angus's challenge to have those conversations, figure out really strategically how we work together. That's across government, national government, regional government, how other entities work. We all have to work together because the problem has got bigger and bigger. And unless we see our way to address those issues all the way down the chain, I think that we won't be able to adequately reach our goals. And in that, I'm also concerned that we're not working in the field enough. So we've got really important cutting edge research that's very exciting and really critical to help us speed up our answers. But our young generation of young professionals are not getting the opportunity to learn in the field, which means they're getting a missing gap in their knowledge to be able to use that information as well as they could. And then in that same way, we're losing our knowledge. So I think we're losing more knowledge that we're actually getting because we haven't captured it and synthesized it. And that's again back to our modality of our structures are just at the edge of being viable. Our government structures, there's not enough freshwater scientists in those structures, so we spread so thin. And we get asked ad hoc to provide advice, but we don't have our full structures in place so that we can work seamlessly and support each other. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right, so I'm going to move on to the next panel member, who is Ms. Joyce Machaba. Welcome. She is a scientist at the Department of Water and Sanitation within the Chief Directorate Water Ecosystems. She is responsible for surface water reserve determination with a specific focus on the water quality component. Ms. Machaba holds a degree in water care technology, a BSc Honours in environmental management, and a Master's in business administration. Welcome, Ms. Machaba, and my introductory question to you is, so although biodiversity monitoring is not a primary responsibility of your department, you do use species in managing water resources. Could you maybe just expand on that?
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity. Okay, from the department's side, the biological species are very important because they are the indicators of the overall health of the ecosystem. So we heavily rely on them for decision making. So the primary role of the resource-directed measures is to ensure that there is sustainable management and utilization of the water resources. And also our aim is to ensure that we protect the water resources. So we understand that the economic growth is important, but we also, our role is to ensure that there's a balance between the economic growth and also the environmental protection. So we use this species heavily when we are doing, for example, the reserve determination. So we use that information to determine the reserve, and also from the policy perspective, our role is to determine the classes and set the RQOs and the reserve. So they give us an indication of what the water resource should be in whatever class, and also to set clear objectives of how do we want to see the water resource being protected. So they are very critical. So their abundance and them being in abundance, they actually give us an indication of how our overall health of the ecosystem. So currently what we are doing, we have commissioned a project with the Water Research Commission, where we are looking at the present ecological state of the country. So what we are doing, it was previously done in 2014. So now we are updating it. So the whole point is to look at has our water resources degraded, or what is going on. So it is a project that we are embarking on at the present moment, and we are using those species, the fish, the aquatic invertebrates, and also the riparian vegetation as the indicators of the health of the ecosystem. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was in a previous life involved in quite a few reserve studies. So, and at that stage, I think South Africa, and maybe still is, the world leaders in reserve determination. Thank you. All right, so our next panelist is Dr. Nontsikelelo Precious Shlongwa. She is currently a postdoctoral fellow within the African Microbiome Program, jointly hosted by the Department of Microbiology and the School of Data Science and Computational Thinking at Stellenbosch University. Nontsikelelo research sits at the interface of microbiome research, environmental health, and antimicrobial resistance, all of which are areas of growing national and global importance. Welcome, Nontsikelelo. And so my question to you is, that was quite a mouthful, and I didn't understand half of what I just said. So maybe tell us a bit more on the role of microbiomes in biodiversity services. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tommy. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity. It is an honor to be part of the panel today. And as someone with the background in environmental microbiome research, human health, and wastewater system, I've come to realize or to see the vital role the vital role that microbiomes or microbes play in connecting ecosystem health and also human well-being. So I'm happy today to contribute in this conversation. To start off with the question of why microbiomes are at the center of freshwater and ensuring ecosystem functions. Microbiomes, which are a community of bacteria, viruses, fungi, and other microorganisms that live together, work together in a particular environment, are the foundation of a healthy ecosystem. So to elaborate on that, they drive the nutrient cycling, they break down pollution, and they support the food web from bottom up. For an example, as we have the gut microbiome in our bodies that help us digest food and break down food that we cannot digest ourselves. Even for river systems and estuaries, they also have their microbiome that assist in digesting and also breaking down toxic metals or materials. So with two key points, I will just mention how they are important and in understanding freshwater and ecosystem functions. So microbial diversity, they are directly linked to ecosystem health. studies have consistently correlated that a diverse microbial community correlates with greater ecosystem multifunctionality, meaning ecosystem can provide more service like water purification and nutrient cycling if they are diverse. And secondly, microbes, they help in decomposing organic matters. They recycle nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus, and even suppress pathogens that can be harmful to humans and also aquatic life. So in them breaking down pollutants and toxins, for an example, in our water systems, many pollutions enters, which includes pesticides, chemicals, and sewage. So the role that microbiomes play is often related in relation to their biochemical machinery that breaks down and transforms these harmful toxins to less harmful substances. For an example, bacteria in oil environment or spillage, they tend to digest hydrocarbons and it makes the environment less toxic. And in our wastewater systems, we find complex microbial community, such as known as activated sludge. So this microbial community, they help in digesting sewage and also purify our water so that when it's released to river systems, it's less toxic. So with that, in South Africa, where our rivers and estuaries are under pressure from pollution, invasive species, and climate change, understanding microbiomes will help us track this ecosystem health and also understand more on how they can be resilient and withstand these pressures. So if we ignore these microbes, we underestimate how quickly toxins accumulate in our ecosystems. So I will just end there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Non-Sikelelo. Excellent example of nature-based solutions there. I think you must apply to the WRC for some research funding. I'm sure Bunani will be happy to fund your research. We've come up with some solutions for the problems that we've heard that we are facing in our freshwater systems. All right, I'm now going to introduce Professor Nikki James. She's a senior scientist here at the South African Institute for Aquatic Biodiversity. Her research focuses primarily on understanding the relationships between coastal and estuarine fish, with a focus on juvenile fish and their habitats. Her research is important for valuing and protecting habitats, but also for understanding the effects of habitat modification and climate change on fish species. So my question to Nikki, just to start things, is what is the current state of knowledge in our estuaries, and what are the threats and key pressures on these ecosystems?
Thanks, Tommy. So I'm preaching to the converted, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about not so much biodiversity, but why estuaries are important and why we should care about biodiversity before moving on to the pressures. So I'm sure you know that in South Africa we have 290 functional estuarine systems, and they're very important because they're at the interface between the terrestrial and marine environment. They are amongst the most productive habitats globally, and that's because they are nutrient and detrital sinks. So we have lots of primary and secondary production, which then fuels fish populations and higher organisms that we harvest. So we have approximately, I think it's about 70,000 hectares of estuarine habitat, which provides sheltered habitat for species along our coastline. And these estuaries provide a number of very important ecosystem services. So to name some of them, I'm a fish person, so the number one for me is that they are nursery habitats for many marine fish species. So of the species that occur in estuaries, 73 are marine species that we call estuarine associated. So most of these species occur in estuaries as juveniles, and then they use the sheltered habitat, the warm temperatures, and all the food that's available to grow rapidly before they move back out to the marine environment. And then lots of them don't come back into estuaries. So we get 73 of these species. And then they're also important for species that move between the oceans and the sea, like eels. They're habitat for aquatic invertebrates, and lots of people harvest invertebrates in estuaries. They're also important habitat and resting areas for migratory and water birds. And if you have healthy estuaries, another ecosystem service is that they're fairly resilient to climate change. And then estuarine vegetation in estuaries is extremely important for a number of services. So seagrass, salt marshes, and mangroves are important in nutrient cycling and water quality regulation. They're important in terms of climate change for buffering coastal communities. So if you're living on the edge of an estuary and you have healthy estuarine vegetation, it can buffer against floods and erosions and sea storms. And then also our vegetation in estuaries is important for climate change mitigation and adaptation. So those same species, so your seagrass, mangroves, and salt marshes, we refer to them as blue carbon habitats. That's because they take up a lot of the CO2 from the atmosphere. They then store and convert that into organic carbon. So they're taking carbon out of the CO2 out of the atmosphere. And then they're also important for fishing. So a lot of people harvest fish in estuaries. And in the early 2000s, so we haven't had a more recent survey, Alan Whitfield estimated that about 2,000 tons of fish are harvested annually from estuaries. But I think that fishing pressure has increased dramatically since the 2000s. And then key pressures on estuaries, so it's a lot of the pressures that are already been discussed. So unfortunately, obviously estuaries along the coast, people like to live on the coast, and often they focus, lots of people live on estuaries, especially at the mouths of estuarine systems. So they are one of our most degraded habitats in South Africa as well as globally. And a large reason for that degradation is nutrient enrichment and eutrophication. And then we get habitat loss and transformation. So not only does nutrient enrichment cause, it causes you to lose habitat, as well as obviously you develop the edges of estuaries and lose that habitat that's important. And then freshwater abstraction, overfishing, and then climate change often exacerbates those existing anthropogenic threats to estuaries. So for example, if you've got nutrient enrichment, then warming temperatures coupled with that nutrient enrichment can lead to harmful blooms of macro and microalgae. So we get increasing harmful algal blooms in estuaries, which then results in habitat loss. And then as a fish person, one of the biggest threats to fish in estuaries is overfishing. So because most of your marine species occur as juveniles, you get growth overfishing. So you take out the juveniles before they can recruit to adult fish stocks. And we've got 19 species that have to use estuarine habitats as nursery areas. And 7 of those are caught in our line fishery. And unfortunately, it's not looking good for them. So 4 of those species, the populations have collapsed, and then 1 is overexploited. I think that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Nikki. Lots of multidisciplinary work required to address this, especially since the dependence of our estuaries on a good quality water coming from the catchments. So determining the reserve and the resource quality objectives is very important for these systems. All right, our last panelist that I'm going to introduce is Ms. Nonkoliso Ngibantaka. Nonkoliso is currently a fish collections officer here at the South African Institute for Aquatic Biodiversity, where she's responsible for the preservation and management of aquatic biodiversity collections. She holds a BSc in Biological Sciences and an honours degree from the Walter Sisulu University, as well as a master's degree in zoology from the Nelson Mandela University. Glad you're keeping it all here in the Eastern Cape. Nonkoliso has gained valuable experience through internships at the Department of Environmental Affairs, Bayworld Museum, WWF, and the South African National Biodiversity Institute. So she comes with a lot of experience. And this has strengthened her expertise in environmental conservation and natural science. So my question to you, Nonkuliso, is what do you think is the role of collections and biobanks in informing biodiversity protection? Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. So mine is to talk about the role of collections and biobanks in biodiversity science. So since we are talking about biodiversity, I think it is important for me to highlight two things: the size of our collection and also the diversity of the collections that we have. So we have about 1 million specimens in our collection, representing about 400 and something families and 5,000 and something species. But this is not just about the size of the collection that we have. It is not about preserving or documenting this. The most important question is, why do we have this collection? What the purpose that they serve? So the main purpose of our collection is to support research and education. Let me start with education. So we engage with communities through outreach initiatives such as Grahamstown festivals, national science weeks, and other events. So these platforms help us to showcase our collection, to inspire future scientists. And then when it comes to research, as Albert would say, we cannot conserve what we don't know. So we have taxonomists who use our collection as a reference point. They use this collection to name, to classify, and to monitor to see if there's any changes in aquatic environments. So I'll make an example of two species that we have just to show you how we monitor or how the researchers, we're not researchers, we are supporting research. So what happens is that, let me make an example of Sandelia capensis that you showed in the presentation. So the oldest specimen that we have here in our collection is Sandelia capensis. It was collected in 1875. So there are so many studies that have been done in this species. And in one of the studies, I think it was done by Lenda et al. In 2011, he mentioned, or she mentioned, two things: that the species the major threat to this species is invasive species, and the other one is habitat destruction. That is, I'm not sure if, I think it's water abstraction, yes. I think a year after that one, Albert and Swart, they did another study, and they mentioned that the threat to this species is water abstraction. So I'm not sure who's responsible for water abstraction. I will assume that it's municipality. Maybe they are trying to satisfy human needs, and then we have the scientists here. The scientists. And I'm wondering if there's any communication between the municipality and the scientists. So maybe that's another gap that we'll talk about later. And then let me make an example of another species, which is Shitia brevis. I think Roger is, one other thing about species, the Sandelia capensis, it's endemic in Eastern Cape and Western Cape. It's endemic there. And then this other species that Roger is working on, that is, what's the name? Shitia brevis. The threats, they mentioned that the threat is the same threat, that is the invasive species, and the habitat destruction, that is your water abstraction. And the difference with this one, I'm not sure about Sandelia capensis, I'm not sure about its red listed or not, but this one, it's endangered. It's endangered, and it's experiencing the same threat, that is the one that the Sandelia capensis was experiencing, that is the invasive species and the water abstraction. So I am worried now about the Sandelia capensis. That means it might happen that it might also go extinct or endangered. So that means we have to think of conservation planning. And then let me move on. The most important part, I just wanted to highlight the monitoring and why they are doing the monitoring part. And then the most important part that we do is that we have to share this information with the public. We have to share this information with decision makers and policy makers. How do we do this? So for Biobank, the Biobank launched the BBSA in 2023. BBSA stands for Biodiversity Biobank SA. So they launched this so that they can improve the quality of their samples and also to make things easy for people to access the information. But fortunately or unfortunately, only 7 biobanks are active. So they use Bold as a source of access. If you want to access their sequences, they use Bold, which stands for Barcode of Life Data Systems. And I know that they are working towards joining GGNIGGIN, Global Genome Information Network. So they are working towards that. That shows the importance of sharing with the public. For us, the collection people, we use specify on daily basis to capture the information of the species that we have, and then that data is moved to GB for everyone to access, for the public to access. Yes, I think for now I can stop there.
Right, I think let's give our panelists. Thank you very much. I'm now going to open up for questions. I've got a question online to all the panelists. Maybe I can read it quickly. For those online, sorry, apologies. I said you can put it in the chat, but there is actually a question function, question and answer function. So if you're online, just put it into that function. But I'm going to read this question from Katlego. And he says, to all, given the ongoing challenges to water security in South Africa, including infrastructure failures, climate change impacts, and growing demands, what are the most effective strategies and policy recommendations to ensure a sustainable and equitable water future for South Africa? Are there any current success stories with rehabilitation and mitigation of freshwater systems? Any developments with infrastructure? All right. There's a few questions in there, but to the panel, we will make a first attempt. Maybe I should break it down. So the first one is, what are the most effective strategies and policy recommendations for ensuring sustainable and equitable water future for South Africa?
Thank you for your question, Katlego. I'm going to try and attempt. In terms of microbiome research, yeah, especially in wastewater, we've also part of our team is analyzing water from influent, effluent, and river systems, and we have seen that those challenges where we still see polluted water even after treatment because of the infrastructure that is degrading. So I think what will help is interdisciplinary teams collaborating with, working together as communities, researchers, and also students. Not only producing stuff and or research that help us graduate or publish papers, but try and take these solutions to technology transfer from these innovative solutions, work with the municipality in using them to help our community. For an example, with my PhD, I worked on developing a rapid tool for detecting detecting pathogens in wastewater. And at that point, or even now, we had like expensive equipment that are currently being used to monitor this microbial community and to monitor our water systems for the presence of pathogens. So I came up with a cheaper and quicker tool for detecting these pathogens, and a portable tool that can be used on field or in field, because most of the time we travel long distances, and in remote areas we collect the samples and travel a long distance to our labs, and by the time we get there we are not getting like a clear reflection of what's happening on field or where we collected the samples. So coming up with new ways to innovative ways to, or even mobile labs that can help us analyze and monitor this microbial community on site instead of moving, and also that is accessible to people living in resource limited settings like rural areas, and also affordable, and also just turning our research into business and something that can benefit both the community and us. Yeah, and that's.
Yeah, if you can hand over to Nancy. Oh, okay.
Okay, I think from the policymakers' point of view, what we are doing when we are setting the water resource classes and the RPOs and the reserve, when we are doing that process, we are engaging with the whole stakeholders, you know, all the people that are in the catchment, who knows the catchment, and when we and who have also some sort of a visioning perspective, where would they want to see their catchment going. So when we are setting the resource, when we are doing the classifications and the RTOs, we are taking into consideration everybody that is affected and that is affected in the catchment, and for us to be able to set it and for us to be able to make a decision. So we actually make an informed decision, taking into consideration everybody's needs in the catchment, all the stakeholders. We actually do a robust stakeholder participation to ensure that at the end of the day, the decision that we make as the policymaker is inclusive of everyone. So yeah, from our perspective, that's how we're making a decision to ensure sustainable and equitable utilization of our water resources. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I think that is a tough question, because there's so many strategies and policies, and I think we really can't be faulted in our excellent strategies, our excellent policies, but I think the robust stakeholder, the process of undertaking them and implementing them is where the success stories are. And so, for example, where there's for the Western Cape, for example, there's multi-institutional groups that include farmers, various governmental institutions that come together regularly, and then they figure out feasible ways to take these multitude of policies and implement them. And so I think it's that the success stories are when there's multidisciplinary people coming together and figuring out how to implement.
Yeah, I definitely agree. As you said right in the beginning, it's very important in the current economic climate that we work not in silos, but that we work together. Each of the different entities, institutions represented here or online have got expertise that they can contribute and assist each other to ensure that these excellent strategies are actually implemented. All right, so there's quite a few questions coming in now. So the next one I want to say, there's a question from Grace that asks, how does the drilling of boreholes positively or negatively affect biodiversity of freshwater? Who wants to take that one on?
I could give it a start.
Yeah, okay.
It depends. So again, that's where the science and the adequate planning and adequate information sharing and multidisciplinary teams come together. So it depends on how well this best available science is implemented, and that all areas are covered. And so I'm gonna give an answer because it could happen. The same thing could happen twice, but it depends on how it was effected, whether the legislation was taken into consideration. So all measures were considered. Sorry to skip aside from that. Don't know if anyone else would like to answer that. So I mean, that's even an adequate understanding of the ecosystem that has been impacted. So what is the groundwater level? Is it groundwater dependent? There's a multitude of scientific knowledge that needs to be brought to bear to answer the question correctly.
Yeah.
And ongoing monitoring.
I also know from farmers' side, bringing the water from the groundwater to the surface now creates a wetland on the surface, which adds an ecosystem, but it's not natural. So how do you deal with that? All right. Another question to the panel. What is the role of local stewards in protecting, restoring their local water catchment areas? Also, if you are involved in looking after a water catchment area, where can one get information on the best approaches to protect, restore the catchment area? Question.
So just for estuaries, I would say engaging with the, if there's an estuarine management plan for that system. In the Western Cape, they're probably a lot better than us also in terms of bringing all the role players in estuaries together. So there is a Western Cape estuaries task team, which is quite the scientists and the managers, and those people sitting on local estuary trusts all in one meeting. I think we definitely need that approach countrywide.
That's great. Let's say, for example, you're from the Eastern Cape. What would you do now if you're in a catchment, Keiskamma catchment, for example, and you want to get involved? Where do you go?
Okay, it's in terms of the water resource management, what we have in catchment, we have what we call catchment management forums. So in those forums is people coming together with the same goal and the same vision of the catchment. So that is what is happening in I think we've got quite a number of catchment management forums in a lot of catchment in the country. So that's where all the discussions are being made there in terms of the water resource management.
And are those forums active?
Most of them are, yes, we are struggling here and there with them, but we do have the catchment forums that are active and doing very well. It's something that we are struggling with in the department, but they are active forums.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, you can find it on the DWS website.
Yes.
Yeah, so the contact details should be there. All right, then there's a question. There's an increasing amount of red tape around permits for working on faunal groups, especially vertebrates. Students of honours and master's level are unable to get the right permits in place in time for their studies. In some cases, fieldwork is being excluded from student project. Is anyone addressing this trend? I think it's not just about permits, it's about ethical clearance and so on and so forth, which is the right direction to go into. But I think it probably has to do more with capacity within the relevant departments to address the number of applications coming in, and that's causing maybe the delay. I don't know if our panel is experiencing this.
I don't. I think it's at each university, it depends how long their clearance process takes place.
Yeah, but that's for ethical clearance. I think this is permits. It's probably for working in conservation areas or just D50 choice.
I mean, I think we're not there's no one on the panel that issues the permit, so we would be careful to speak on behalf of that, but I think that in support we could do more, because we could do more in terms of convening expert panels to help with some of the new I believe there's new ethical concerns, etc., that arise, and it's difficult in an ad hoc way to each address that. And I think that there probably is a need for some scientific panels to help have expert national opinions on some of those to help facilitate some of the processes. But I'm definitely speaking outside of my role and expertise.
There's a question in the audience. Is it in response to that?
No, it's just a question outside of current
Okay.
just for the audience. It's just a quick question to, I think, the audience itself and the panel also. By the look of things, I'm saying that we're having a very nice, informative conversation with each other, and there's been words that we've heard that preaching to what is it, preaching to the converted. And I think all of the information that I'm gathering from what we're having right now would be very great information that could actually be given to the community. In fact, I am looking around this room and I'm only seeing people of the same discipline. There's all scientists, people that are aware of science, and there's no one from the community. I'm not sure whether online there's people that are from the community, maybe community leaders or just general people from the community. So as I'm thinking right now, if we were to speak about how the water from Makanda, in general, just inside Makanda, we have not been having water to actually just to take a bath with, despite us drinking the water and it being an issue. You know, such things that you guys are giving out there now, it's very good information. But then I just want to know, what is it that scientists are actually doing to actually bridge the communication barrier between them and the community, despite us using our science point of view or our science language? What are we trying to do going further on? Other projects that you guys in the panel are aware of, or are you guys now currently doing that are going to actually help and assist that there should not be actual barriers, these huge barriers that we're currently having right now within communities and scientists, so that we cannot be here actually having these conversations alone with each other? Because I'm thinking it's just not so informative for the other party that we're actually trying to help out there. Thank you.
Yeah, I think Joyce has already mentioned some good examples from the Department of Water and Sanitation, especially through the reserve determination studies, where they include the community, because it's very important that all the stakeholders is aware of what is happening within a water resource. Because you cannot say, for example, if the farmers cannot understand that water must flow into the sea, to them that's a waste. And I think most of the community probably thinks the same way. So it's very important that they are informed as to the reasons why there's a need for water to flow into the sea and for the estuary to open. But I don't know, before we go to the next one, would you like to, someone just respond to that question?
I guess in a way forward, again, I'll point to our regional, in the structure, our regional colleagues that work in stewardship and in those kind of multidisciplinary forums. So it's to make sure that they are part of the asking the questions of which research do they need to support them, so they can be part of the filters. So I think we need various filters when we identifying our research, and once we decide on what to take forward as priorities of the year or of the next 5 years, we want to make sure that it is our everyone across the structure, whether they're NGOs, whether they're civil society, that we know what some of their concerns are. So difficult to answer on behalf, but I take your point. So in the way that we structure our research.
Yeah.
Thanks.
As Angus said, co-design and co-create.
I think we are doing something, but I would agree with the comments that there is a need to do more. There is a need to, as scientists, to get to as many communities as we can, because the whole point of environmental management, water resource management, it's not dependent only on the department and the scientists, but it is a collaborative effort. So I do agree that there is a need for the scientists to go out there and also to try to make the language as simple as possible so that people grasp what exactly are we trying to achieve. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I know that there's probably so many questions out there, so but I think it's again to look very closely at our structure and our modality of how we work together. Because in SAIAB we've got mainstreaming teams and across NGOs. So we don't want one scientist to have to be everyman and try and do all of those things, because then we'll undermine the science. So because we're not working together as well as we could, we're not putting enough resources into that component of mainstreaming and taking, so we need to look across that whole structure. And many parts of the structure need to be strengthened, and our collaboration needs to be strengthened. And again, if something gets funded out, that doesn't ever get linked back to the people in our governmental structures, then we're missing that opportunity. We poised to do the mainstreaming, but we didn't get the science opportunity. So it's that structure. Thanks.
Thank you. We've got 2 questions in the audience, and I've got 3 online still.
Yeah, thank you very much. And this question sort of stems from Tommy's comment about water coming up from borehole and creating a wetland. Now, in the panelists, sort of this question to all the panelists in terms of how do you manage sort of biodiversity in artificial water bodies? So we've got dams, we've got canal systems, we've got IBTs, we've got a lot of systems that, well, they harbor invasive species, they harbor a lot of indigenous species, and some of them are very good at harboring endemic, indigenous, endangered species, for example, the cliff or Litfist in some dams in the Western Cape, which are basically gone in the natural rivers. But if the system is already massively transformed and they're only there because of humans, that makes management quite tricky. And some of those, especially indigenous species that are living in some of those dams, their population status might be quite different without those dams. And are we maybe incorrectly sort of assessing the population status because they've got a really big population in one dam means that they're not threatened, but without that dam, they're gone or they're very low status. So how do we sort of acknowledge the human positive of these artificial water bodies, but also the human negative? We know the negatives, but how should it, if it's artificial, even if there's a positive, is it a warranted positive? Because it's not going to be there forever. Yeah.
That's to give it a try, but then I'll. Sorry. I think that's a great research question, and I think that there's the analogy of the boiling water, and we only know what the currents, and as our new generations come in, they assess the situation as if this is what it always was. There's quite a danger of that. So I think it's really important to be very clear on our terminology and our assumptions, and really describe what have we lost in terms of habitat. And we're missing that. We're losing our information. We're not collating it correctly. And so when we're talking about apples, we should be talking about apples, and then pears. We're dropping the ball quite often when we come into a question and we just address it from one perspective, and we haven't been bringing along that full question. So part of our status of what ecosystems have been lost, we need to be quite clear of the historical natural systems, and we need to talk about degradation in terms of those transformation and really get our terminology correct. And so, yeah, with the help of ongoing research, we do need to do that. And we certainly need to know about novel systems and you know, our future management is going to be heavily around those novel systems. But we still always have to acknowledge what we've lost and think of those holistically, and also be very explicit about the cost of that. So the more we lose on natural systems, the more expensive it is to manage in these particular ways. And we haven't really been documenting that carefully and extensively enough. So it's a great research, you know, research area going forward. Thanks.
Just talking to that, I mean, you would know more about the RDN process, but it does look at those transformed systems. But as you were saying, they have to go back to what the reference condition. So even if they're completely transformed, then you manage them to try and keep them at the best possible level you can.
Thank you. Warren has got a question, and then I see Tiki Forbes got his hand up online as well.
Thanks very much. My name is Warren Putz. I'm a chair in Inland and Coastal Fisheries at Rhodes University. I just wanted to make more of a comment with the hope of generating some discussion, hopefully for the panelists. But the first thing is that obviously when we're talking about biodiversity problems, we're talking about changing human behavior. That's essentially what we all want to do. And the majority of the discussion thus far has been changing it from the perspective of governance down, having appropriate policy, then institutional structures which are appropriate. We've recognized that there are a lot of institutional structures that aren't appropriate for optimal governance at the moment. And we've recognized the need to have a look at those institutional structures so that they serve the implementation of the policy effectively. But in changing human behavior, there's also something other than the typical legislative and rational actor process, and that's in the normative. And we've spoken a little bit about education and awareness, but I think one of the major gaps in this room is that we don't have environmental social scientists among us to try and talk a little bit to changing people's behavior from a normative perspective. And so you can take education and awareness, but it doesn't necessarily, in fact, in most occasions, doesn't convert into practice. And we have to figure out ways of turning what we know, the knowledge that we know, and try and identify where the problems are, and then facilitate the development of programs that basically promote pro-environmental behavior. So for me, pro-environmental behavior research and programs focusing on that type of thing are certainly the way to go, in parallel with understanding the governance process.
You might get a bit of interference. Not okay, no.
Sorry. So we need the governance structure sorted, and in parallel, we need to really invest in pro-environmental behavior approaches, focusing on the normative and alternative ways of improving the way people do things. And if we can do that, then I think we're on the right path. At the moment, I haven't heard enough of the pro-environmental behavior part, and I think that is probably a gap that needs to be addressed. Thanks.
Thanks, Warren. Definitely. Okay, Nancy.
Yes, 100%. That's part of the full structure all the way down to the ground. And I agree. I'd like to see action and implementation. And so I wasn't able to articulate it as well as you. But for me, the implementation is that our science doesn't end up with a one-day workshop, which is not a real handover. It's the science is working on the ground in that broader team. So I'd like to see with the social ecologist, an ecologist part of that team, because then that way they getting to know the questions, the on the ground feasible, you know, what's feasible on the ground, and they're applying their knowledge also to help come up with answers. So if the ecologist, the ecologist could be on that team, I think working out the answers together would be an addition to your really important point. So I agree 100%.
Thank you. Is Tiki's hand still up?
No, but you can just double check maybe.
Tiki, did you have a question?
Well, a bit of a question, bit of a comment as well, if you bear with me. First of all, good afternoon, ladies of the panel. It was quite superb to see a 5-lady panel. I mean, and I say that in the nicest way. I hope I'm not seen as patronizing at all, but it's great to have you there. I'd like to follow up on some of the points that Nikki was making, because she is an estuarine ecologist. She's a fish biologist, but I'll forgive her for that. Okay, but I mean, the points that she was making, I think, are highly relevant, that she was emphasizing the significance of estuaries as nursery grounds. The same applies to quite a few invertebrates as well, like the swimming prawns, the mangrove crabs, and a couple of other crustaceans. What I would like to comment on those, we've been involved in several EFRs in different areas. We did estuarine management plans, ecological components for the Mashlongwa south of Durban, for Durban Bay. We're presently involved in one for the Mkomas. And the one disappointment is that, basically we know how to mess up our wetlands. We were plenty of history. People have been around. I've been around for longer than I care to think about and seen these degradations. It actually hurts to be an ecologist. But it's the sort of follow-up that bothers me. Because particularly, things like the Mashlongwa and the Mkomas, these are mandated. They legally have to be all mandated. So there's got to be some sort of follow through. And that's where the system seems to collapse. That what happens, what we've found in our experience quite often is that, particularly in case of something like the Mashlongwa, we were eventually seen as the policeman. We would make recommendations as ecologists for the maintenance, for the restoration where possible. And if nothing happened, the people would then come back to us and say, well, what are you going to do about it? Now, you get this sort of assumption that we're now going to be policemen and we're going to enforce the sort of recommendation that we made, which are obviously just not feasible. So if there is going to be research, there was a mention just now of the social people that should be involved. Maybe they could be involved, although that I should think would probably be fairly tricky in terms of getting these mandates, getting these recommendations through to the enforcement authorities. We did surveys on the Mkomas for something like 20-odd years. And the reports would have to go to SAPI, they would go to DFFE, the Water Affairs and so on. And consistently from year to year, there would have been sand winning operations going on, which are obviously highly disruptive to both the actual estuarine environment and the riparian vegetation, because big trucks are being moved around. We'd say this is not a good idea as far as the estuary is concerned, and then would disappear down a black hole. So it's that sort of thing that actually eventually leaves you a little bit disillusioned. We know what's going on out there. We know how to degrade these systems. We know what sort of recommendations can be made to improve, but they're not picked up. Somebody must pick up that ball and run with it. Okay, thank you.
Yes, just a quick response.
Just to add, I agree with Tiki. So I was involved in the reserve study for the Eastern Cape estuaries recently, and we've just finished the RQO process. But I couldn't get out of it who was responsible for actually making sure that the resource quality objectives were met for each estuarine system. So I don't know if that's at the municipal or the local level, but who holds the responsibility after the process.
Yeah, I think that's one of the challenges. We've got a beautiful system that works well with a lot of expertise input, but when it comes to implementing and policing what was suggested, that's the problem.
Yeah, I think our business plan is a bit flawed, so we don't have we haven't spread the resources we haven't thought it through how we're going to implement and how to spread the money, no matter who it is in that whole picture. So I don't think we have a holistic business plan, and we just hope that the bridges will be, and there's a role for bridging, before it gets to the municipality, as Aaron was saying, there's an interpretation, there's each different individual entity's got a different mandate, and the way they need information is quite specific. And so they can't sometimes cross over their mandate to then do the extra work to interpret the information as it's given. And we don't have a good business plan to fill the gaps to deliver. I don't think.
Yeah. All right, thank you. There's 4 more questions. I don't know if we're going to have time to get to them. So we will respond to those online questions. We'll ask the panel to just respond to it. There's a question on pit latrines and microbes. There's a question on invasive potato bug. And there's 2 questions stating, maybe we should meet again soon and come up with a project, and we tackle a problem as a community, and we fix it, and we show proof of concept, and we roll that out to the rest of the country, which I think is a great idea, at least on paper. Okay, so the program director is indicating to me that we must wrap up the panel discussion. I would hate to stop it because I think there's good discussion. Oh, do you want to ask a question? Oh, okay. Well, I have to allow you to ask a question.
So you can still take the 3 or 4 days.
I think I'm very much encouraged by the question around social scientists missing in this chain. This is very, very important. No ecologist can understand how people are going to behave when you say stop catching these fish here. But the social scientist does that very well. And we keep missing this multidisciplinary approach and impact. Now we are trying to emphasize, at least from the WRC side, that you must tell us who are your stakeholders and who are you building a team with. Because you have to address that. Imagine if we change the behavior of the polluters, let me call them polluters. If we change the behavior of the human beings in the catchment, really all this monitoring will not matter because there will be no sources of pollution. Assuming government is doing its own business as well. But the pollution, the system look like they look now because of us. If we change that behavior, I'm telling you, we'll save so much money. We just have to engage that. Perhaps when we establish the Citizen Scientists Association for Southern Africa, it was because of that. We want to empower communities to take the lead and actually hold us accountable. Whoever is polluting must be held accountable. But again, as you say, we need people who understand how to talk to people and be on board here. But I have got my own 2-3 questions. One is overall. You all talk about the flow modification, which was mentioned also in the earlier presentations. Some of this is because of the alien invasive plants. Some were probably authorized as plantations more than 100 years ago. Now the question is, would you recommend that the licenses of these plantations be reviewed in the context of climate change, 0-day threats? We still have plantations of eucalyptus, wattle, and the like all over the catchment, and we know they are modifying that flow. Should we be reviewing those licenses, or what should we do to retain or restore our waters in these systems? That's because you all talk about that. I think you can all try that. Yeah? And then the specific question so that you can take your mic and go to me. It's to Nongoliso, you talk about biobank. Beautiful story. But now I just want to check, would you be adding water quality variables when you talk about this kind of a bank? That's one area that I think we are missing a lot. Can we collect this water quality where we collect information about the species, so that we know this was the reference, this is what is happening over the time. But you have to preserve that water as well somewhere. I assume you've got no -70 degrees freezer that you can. Are you growing towards water quality biobank, a bank on top of your biobank? And then the last question is to non-scalable. Non-scalable, you talked about pathogens, and I like your latest way of seeing things and saying, let's be mobile, let's have real-time data, let's get it now and report now. This sounds very interesting, but I assume you were only referring to particular case studies. Would you be strengthening this tool to be a tool that can be taken up by citizens as well as a policy? Thank you.
Okay. I think it is possible to take water samples, but what we do as the collection staff, we only take the tissue samples. But I know that there are students who take the information of the water, that is the temperature, the water quality, and the samples. But for us, we don't keep the samples. But I read something about eDNA that you are working on, Albert. But I'm not an expert in that, but I know that you are working towards that, of taking eDNA instead of collecting the physical specimens. Maybe Albert, you can add on that. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to do that. But I know that you are working on that project.
Yeah, I think most samples being collected in the collection facility comes with metadata that includes where it was collected, what was the water temperature, etc., etc. And then there are other entities that do long-term observations of say water quality or so on. And what we need to get better at is making sure that all these different databases actually talk to each other, and they are not different entities, because you can spend months just trying to find the data from all the different sources.
Yeah, but my worry, Tom, is that we have got emerging chemicals now.
Yes.
That we don't even know their ecotoxicological effects, which means research must be done around that.
Yes.
To say, no, don't worry, these are not a problem, these are actually a problem.
Yes.
That technology or that knowledge expertise may not come now.
Yeah.
But these things are flowing in our rivers now.
Yes.
So we need to bank them so that next person, next level, people rather than us can actually test them, because the whole list is very big.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question. Just to answer the first one on climate change and licenses, if I'm not mistaken. In my opinion, I think building awareness around that is very important, and also trying to modify those licenses to incorporate the new challenges and problems that we are facing brought by climate change, which is something that we cannot deny. So trying to incorporate microbiome-based solutions or solutions that work around climate change and also awareness, that's important. And in terms of the real-time monitoring systems, based on what I worked on my PhD, what I was trying to do, because the current methods obviously are based in the lab, they are expensive and time-consuming, and also very complicated to work around it. So my plan at that point, and which I was successful to do that part, some part of it, was to develop those portable devices that the community can use For an example, the tool that I was working on was to detect pathogens in wastewater or river systems or any drinking water systems. So that was based, there was a molecular tool or protocol or method. So anyone can be able to operate that, but if you have your water and taking a sample before drinking that water and using that device, adding a few reagents, based on color change, which is a simple thing, based on color change, anyone can know that, okay, from yellow to green, if this color changes, then that means this is not safe to drink. So trying to develop those kind of real-time monitoring systems and also that are user-friendly and also cheap. I think that's important, and I'm hoping to work towards that. Even with any, I think, solutions that we come up with, I think we need to think about those things. Can our community be able to use this device, if it's a device or system? Can they understand the language? Is it cheaper? Is it affordable? Or it's only for people living in higher end areas? Yeah. I don't know if you need more information.
No, I'm conducting on writing.
Were all your comments addressed?
No, the people are expected to say a lot about wastewater. The downstream estuaries are drying up. We said that. We know there's no water reaching that. What must we do? Who is taking water and how do we stop that?
Yeah, the plantations, yes.
Yes, how do you do that?
I think from the department's perspective, what can be done is to relook into the water use licenses. Basically do a compulsory licensing where all the licensing are being taken, and we're relooking into the whole process and also into the new condition basically. So compulsory licensing can be able to assist with this challenge. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, I don't want to ease into Albert's concluding remarks, which will be good. But what I would like to end off with, and because that is the purpose of this workshop to a certain extent, I don't think we probably need a week-long workshop to do this properly, but I would just like to ask the panelists, what are the research gaps and what should we, as Angus said, focus on? Where should we be placing our emphasis in terms of research infrastructure and research funding to address some of these gaps? Just a quick, we'll go down the list of panelists. Thanks.
Yes, I mean, I'd like to say to the many people that have attended to not get demoralized because it's so quick to be able to name, and so please contribute your knowledge about your stated research gaps to Bonani and Albert, so that it doesn't get lost in the valuable time of everyone. This is just a starting, people to think about it. So because I'm not going to be able to speak comprehensively in like a 1 minute, but I'd like to just reiterate the foundational informational gaps. We held back by foundational information gaps, even though we know there's so much information out there, but there's really critical gaps. We talk about speaking to a reference state. We haven't really described what is the reference state that we're setting our subjective way forward on. So even describing reference states of ecosystems. So there's a lot of gaps around species, but the description of what is the reference state for our ecosystems, undescribed our classification systems, or what drives those conceptual models of ecosystems. We've got big gaps, but we can also synthesize what's known. So just look like for the foundational information. There's so much more to say, but
All right,
appeal to everyone to write in their request.
Yeah, I think, Albert, the ideas will produce a summary of the workshop, and we'll ask the panelists to actually add additional information that they couldn't get across. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think from my perspective, and it has been mentioned before, is real-time monitoring. I think that is one of the biggest gaps that we are having in the department. As much as we are vetting the RQOs and determining the classes and the reserve, I think what is of a big challenge is how do we monitor that, and as the world is evolving and things are changing, technology being advanced, we need to look into how can we automate that, how can we get real-time data, and also looking into analyzing that data and using that data for decision making. So from our perspective, that is a big gap that we are having. But after we have done all of this work, putting strategy in place, how do we then monitor to ensure that we achieve the goals that we desire to achieve? Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of microbiome research, it's an emerging field, and I think we really need capacity development and investment in training and training scientists and also researchers in using a standardized protocol so that we can all get the same results at least, and be able to use those results in future. And also in terms of the interdisciplinary teams, we really need to work with ecologists, data scientists, and water managers and the community. That is a big gap. And I've already mentioned the investment in mobile labs and field equipment to help us reach remote sites, and building infrastructure and network. Nogaliso mentioned that they have a biobank. So even for microbiome, we really need national databases of aquatic microbiomes integrated with water quality management.
Thanks very much. So from the estuaries point of view, we're quite a small group of specialists working in the estuarine environment. And I was just canvassing that group of people, and like Tiki was talking about the importance of invertebrates, there are very few invertebrate specialists working on estuaries. So that's a major gap. So especially invertebrate taxonomists, because apparently they're quite a complicated group to get a handle on, because you've got multiple methods, and then there are very few people that can ID the smaller species. So yeah, we don't have baseline information for a lot of estuaries on the invertebrates. And then talking about baseline information, we're still using information from the 80s and 90s, which was when the last countrywide regional survey was conducted. So we're desperately in need of a countrywide survey of estuaries. And then from the fish perspective, we're also not looking at extraction from estuaries, so we don't know how many fishermen there are. We don't have information about catches, so which is a major data gap. And then to build on what Tommy's doing, so SAIAB is LTR in estuaries, but we need to build on the bigger sort of invertebrates and the fish on top of your water quality information. And then also long-term monitoring is important so you can see if you're meeting your objectives and for climate change.
Okay, thank you. So when we talk about biodiversity and conservation, we have to consider three P's. That is the planet, the people, and the profit. But I will focus more on the people and the planet, because most of the problems that we're facing are as a result of our activities. And one thing that I've noticed from our discussions is that the problem with the collaboration and communication. I think we need to improve on our communication. If you remember when I was talking about sharing data, I talked about GBIF and the GGIN, and all the specimens that are listed there are written in scientific names. So that means that the community or the people that we are living with in villages are excluded. So we need to work more on that to include the people needs for villages in fact. So.
All right, thank you very much. I think from all the discussions we had, there are many more conclusions and research gaps that we will add to the summary from this workshop. But just to conclude, I think let's give the panel once again just a warm hand. Thank you very much. I'll now hand over to the program director again. And we'll do that after you all. Right. Thank you. Ronnie said they are gifts for the panel.
Thanks, colleagues. Thanks, everyone. I think my role here is to just thank everyone. I'll start with thanking the panelists. Yeah, I think this was a very nice and stimulating conversation and discussion. When we started, when this idea came about through the discussions with Bonani from WRC, we said, let's make the discussions organic. And that's what really happened, throughout the 3 hours or so that we've had, or 3 hours. A lot to process, a lot that came out from this conversation. I'm not going to mention everything. I was trying to jot down as much as possible, but we're going to consolidate all this information into a document that we're going to share with everyone for input, and then it's going to direct, how we are going to move forward in terms of the short-term, medium-term, and long-term research needs. But from the DCO, from Angus, introductory or welcome message, and also from the conversations that have been ongoing, we know the benefits of biodiversity. We know the threats. We know what needs to be done. We know the solutions. And I think what really needs to be done now is for us to do what we already know that needs to be done. And that's really now moving from just problem identification more towards, solution, action. I think we need to start, moving towards action and implementation. But for us to be impactful, we need to make sure that we bring everyone into the same room. So the idea of co-creation, who is missing? So I think from here now, we need to go back and say, from this gathering, who are the other key stakeholders that we need to invite? There's a message that came through to say, we need to do more of this, so that when we sit down again to do another workshop of this kind, we need to make sure that all the relevant stakeholders are in the same space. I think another point that was raised, and I think it was Nancy, very interesting, was the modality in which we work. And I think that's what prevents the collaboration that everyone is talking about, because we are competing for limited resources. So we need to change the mindset, what Warren mentioned. We need to start really realizing that we need to pool the resources, identify the challenges, and then collapse the silos. I think there was a message that was put from one of the people online. I think people are desperate for success stories. You can, from what Tila presented on, where people were asking, are there any, success stories where interventions have actually resulted in the recovery of certain species? Another question was, are there any, interventions that have assisted with, rehabilitating successfully some of the systems? I think the message there is, let's get even one or two good success stories, which we can maybe identify a case study where we say from source to sea, working from the catchments all the way to the estuaries, and then make a difference.
and show the community that it's possible, you know, to roll back and collectively put our heads together and make an impact. I think, yeah, that's these are just my few takeoff sort of high level points, but there's quite a few more that I'll share and then we'll circulate with the community. But I really want to thank everyone, those who are here present in the room, and those who have joined us online. Thank you. And I will hand over to the program director to conclude. So, thank you.
Thanks, colleagues, and thanks, colleagues online, for being very, very patient with us. There's just one point I would like to quickly go through. Thank you very much to all the speakers, starting from Angus in the morning, and the messages, the material. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tommy. As I said, you will make us talk. You see now, we did not even finish answering the questions. And those questions will come, and the panel will still be engaged to make sure that they are answered. So they are not lost at all. Thanks to the technology again, we can keep these things rolling. Of course, I noted as well the majority of the youthfulness of the panel, which is very, very encouraging, because it says, as we get out of shape, somebody will be holding the pillar. That is very, very encouraging. And of course, we had all of them, not deliberately, I don't know how it happened, but yes, thank you, Our Lady in Bogodo. Thank you. Thanks to our comms, we wouldn't have reached anything like 200 people, including us here online and physical, without the communications. Thanks a lot to your team and the WRC team led by Ndundu. Colleagues, please tell us more in a month's time, because we want to produce this report. I think Albert will be fair to say by 11th of July. Really just write a story, send it to us so that we can produce a serious report. Those who followed WRC very closely, you will realize that when the climate change was becoming such a big thing, there was a report produced around that. This is the research that we should be funding in the next few years, and we are still picking things from there. So please, let's do a lot on this part of it. And I'm very happy with the list that you gave before you step out, the panelists. Thank you very much for that. That's very, very informative. The only thing that Tommy did not ask you is how much are you going to bring to the pot so that we can fund this research. That you did not ask. Thank you very much, colleagues. I will now ask Lucky to direct us. Where do we go from now? I think it's lunch hour now. So if there is lunch, please, Lucky, tell us what to do next. And thank you very much again for your interest. Thank you.